Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Toronto, Canada by Jana Stern. Thank you so much, Jana, for being here, for taking the time, and for connecting once more. And for everybody that is listening and watching us, what can you share about you and your path so far in this life before we get into some of the things that I want to talk about?
Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it so much, Brian. And thank you for the question. I think, so my journey began when I was very, very small. I always say that as a young kid, I knew so much. I was so gifted. And then I went through the forgetting. And so as a young child, I was, around crystals all the time. My grandfather was a collector. And so I was always near them and they would sing to me and tell me stories. And I had very, very young age, at a young age, I had a very intense exposure into mental unwellness. My father was institutionalized. And I came to understand the intensity of what it means to hear voices. And I was like, okay, put that away. Nope, I don't hear voices. It's fine. And in trying to suppress it, a lot of my own mental health stuff came up. And I went through a big journey of, eating disorders and mental health struggles. I was diagnosed at the time with, bipolar. Then they re-diagnosed me borderline personality. And I had a suicide attempt. They brought me back after 11 minutes. And when I came back, I was like, oh, I'm here for a reason. And it's to share the voice that I hear in my head. It's not to hide and shy from it. So I just started on the path of really radiating my light and what did it mean to be in my light and how do I do it better? And how do I eventually teach others to do the same? And so I started to learn about metaphysics and get really, really deep into astrology. And that was something that my father's mother was always really connected to. And we just kind of, was like, well, that's the weird son of the family. But I am the weird part of my family. I always say I'm the psychedelic sheep of the family because I think that black sheep has negative connotations. And, I don't want to misuse the word black, but I just did that over a lifetime. And the deeper I went, as you know, the deeper there is to go. And so I would open what I thought was one portal and it would open multiple portals with more doors to more places for more to learn. And, almost 15 years later, there's a lot of things that I know. And I learned to give some of the healings that I received on the journey of kind of healing from the borderline personality, the other mental health things, the eating disorder, and started to really hone those gifts and use my psychic muscles. And now I'm like in the psychic gym, lifting the 500s, training people with their 50s, their 100s, even sometimes their 5s. I'm like, you just lift it like this. It's totally normal. So that's kind of been my journey and how I got to where I'm at. And I'm hoping that humanity trends in this direction because I think that this is the healing that we all need for the mental health crisis that is global right now.
Thank you for sharing that. I often think it's so important a lot of times to share our journeys because, as you're saying, I have met so many people that they mention after having been part of a process or a path of healing that they actually remember that when they were kids, they actually had that connection and then they were conditioned out of that. And whether that was because their family didn't accept it or themselves saw something and they're like, as you were mentioning, oh, shut this down. Like, I'm not listening to voices, or I'm not connecting to all of this unseen things. And
Yes.
how, how that, I think that disconnection has such a big impact on us, because whenever we are repressing anything or we are shutting things down that is part of our experience, well, there's going to be some kind of imbalance. And I think that that's at the root of, working in a mental health space. At the root of everything, there's imbalances. It's not about, like, mostly, like, we can see things, and being diagnosed, and we can see the chemicals and everything. What's behind that a lot of times? And I think that disconnection, and how most of our education systems are not about giving us the chance to explore our gifts that we're bringing, but to make us into, okay, this is the shape that you all need to be the same, and you all need to unlearn all of that and just be this way. It is a challenging thing for many people, and I think that that's, as you're saying, like, we're having a lot of mental health issues, and a lot of people are experiencing that because, yeah, they are, trying to navigate things and being told what to say yes and what's a no, instead of trusting what's a yes and what's a no, uh, from themselves. So, yeah, I think that's such an important thing to be able to recognize that we live in these seemingly different worlds all of the time. They are the same. They are just experienced differently. And it's like, okay, like, how do we bring all of this together?
Yeah, I think, and I witness it a lot in the young people in my world. I'm fortunate to have a lot of youngsters in my life, um, kids that I care about quite deeply, and watching them as they get older, you can see how the forgetting starts. Oh, I don't want to do that because they're going to think this, or I shouldn't do this because I don't, mommy said that. And I'm like, well, mommy probably lived in a little box herself, and she needs you to fit into the box so that you don't just go all over the place. Um, and you're right, that instinct to say yes or say no when our intuition guides us is so shut down for us. And it creates chaos in the mind because you're not really living in alignment with you, soul you, higher self you. You're living in alignment with like this robotic system. You're a cog in the wheel, but you're not really experiencing the full magic of what's available on this planet. Like, we didn't come here to file taxes and to, work 40-day work weeks or 80-day work weeks, right? We came here to like live on the land, to enjoy food from the earth, and like not to poison the planet. And like, we're just, everything is so capitalistic and backwards. And now that we're kind of like at what we're calling late stage capitalism, which, like, let's be honest, we're they're trying to resuscitate it, but it's not coming back to life, thank God. So but as we're kind of watching it all fall apart, it's becoming more and more clear that what's trending, what's coming forward is like crystals, frequency, the idea of, that we're all in a vessel and connecting to the mind, that you can change your mind, you can change your reality with your mind, that you can physically heal things in your body through frequency and reprogramming. And I had all those diagnoses as a teenager and an early 20 something, and now I don't identify with any of those things now. I'm not saying, and I'm not medicated, and I don't think that that's how everybody should go about their business. Don't just like jump off your meds and figure it out. But I do think that we need to sort of reframe the structure of that shape entirely, not necessarily hone in on the individual and how they're fitting into it, right?
Yeah. I was actually, uh, the other time I was in one of the classes that I teach at university, I was talking with my students because, that age has a lot of, especially the younger students, just those that just came out of high school.
Yeah.
I noticed like the amount of stress, depression, suicidal tendencies, it's huge. And
Particularly in their generation.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I keep on telling them we need to understand certain things that it's like we haven't been taught how to be with ourselves, as you're saying. We've been conditioned and educated out of connecting with ourselves, our the power of our mind, the power of our body, the power of how we're relating, and as well, we didn't learn anything about how to actually understand that we are going to, from a survival perspective, as we try to fit in because we want to belong, we are
Mhm.
abandoning ourselves and we are like living out of authenticity and out of alignment with ourselves. Therefore, all of these imbalances start to happen. And at the same time, nowadays, there's so much connection, so much communication, so much information about things that when we were growing up, there was some, but not as it is now. Like, and
Yes.
there's it's a lot, and I hear from a lot of my students, it's like climate change and like financial issues, and then all of these different like the mental health crisis, all of these different things that are taking place, and I'm like, well, it is a lot. So it is normal for most people to feel completely off in a
Yeah.
chaotic world. It is a normal response to feel a little bit of that chaotic nature. Now, how can we actually be with it? We need to unlearn a lot of the things that we've been conditioned, and we need to rewire, we need to heal, we need to come back into that place of alignment. And we all need to find what's the way to do that. But knowing just there is a way to do it. I was actually in like last class, I was, asking the students to write down what they think about themselves. Who are they? And they
Mm.
started to write, and then I got them for the ones I wanted to share. And except a few that had some, positive things that they were writing about themselves, majority was all of the negative things, all of the ways that they are not, like in a sense, normal or fitting in or all of this. And I started to ask them, like, okay, so what have you been told about yourself, like, especially from your parents or when you were kids and things like that? And it's like, majority were told, most negative things because that's usually what's pointed out. Most times it's not pointed out all of the positive things. So therefore, they start believing that they are not good enough. And I told them, well, if I tell you now, you are good enough, you're perfect as you are, would you believe me? And some of them said, actually, that's the first time that that's even been a question or a possibility of thinking, why did I believe them instead of believing him that he's telling me I'm good enough? But, like it's not as easy as that for most people.
Yeah.
There's processes of unlearning and healing, but, there's so much going on that as we start to allow, as you're saying, the the way moving forward, which is some of the ancient ways of
Yes.
connecting, then we're going to go in a very different direction, whatever it takes us. But it's like, as you were saying, the frequency, vibration,
Yeah.
sound, like all of that, that's actually
Nature,
part of the
plants.
reality. Yes, that's part of our reality, but we have disconnected so much from it. Yeah.
And what's really fascinating about their generation, it had been prophesized for millennia that the rainbow children would arrive, right? And when we look at the astrology of these kids, when we look at who they are being, every single Gen Z that I know is deprogramming something. They are literally Z. They're the end of the alphabet. That's it. That's all, folks. We're done with whatever the nonsense is. And so, in rewriting these stories, they're lost. They're clinging to things that don't necessarily have any value. moving forward. And they're trying to find themselves and recreate themselves or create their generation as something, but they also know that they are the end. And it's very interesting. I have a very fascinating perspective on death and suicide. Like I mentioned, I've had a suicide attempt. I also have the gift, having been on the other side, that I can communicate with the other side. What I know about people who do attempt or complete their suicides, that is their destiny. It's very hard to wrap our heads around it, but it is their destiny. Many, many souls have incarnated for short sentences, and that is what they're here for. And their crazy suicide rates do tie into that finality that they're here to complete. And it's like, it can come across sounding a little harsh as I'm sharing it, but the magic that they're bringing, the grief that comes, which grief is really just love in its most raw form, the grief that comes around the loss of any life, whether it's from taking it, accidentally or through, cancers or whatever it might be, or just naturally ending your life in your late 90s, or hundreds, if maybe that happens. When grief comes about, we learn things about ourselves. How do we love others? Where could we have been better? Where could they have been better? What was missing? What can you do differently with those who are still here? And it transforms something. And I believe that their generation is so full of light, but our older generations have no idea how to even look that in the face. And so their parents, their grandparents are like, well, I'm not dealing with that. Get back into the box, because the box is where I came from and I was fine the whole time. Meanwhile, mom and dad are drinking all the time, and, grandpa was a blackout drunk, and everyone's just totally, ignoring the abuse of generations past, and we're just passing it on and passing it on. And their generation's like, no, we're not doing that. Right. And it's beautiful actually to see how the alphas, the generation after them, have come in just being like, it's all love and light, right? And we're just like, yeah, whatever you say, we're following you. Yes, that's right. Yes, young one, you're correct. And like everything that my nieces and nephew tell me, I'm like, that is the truth. Yes.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I had a conversation once with one of my teachers about what you're talking about, death, whether from whatever, however it came about. And he was saying, well, we don't understand enough to understand, what was the purpose of someone's life? If we believe that we came here as volunteers or choice or to learn something or to experience something, it's not just about that specific person's experience. Someone, because this happened because a friend of mine, when I was young, died of cancer, and he mentioned, perhaps his purpose was to come and show you, the people around him, something about, life. And as you're saying, this grief, as you're talking about, it's part of the understanding that it's not that grief, we shouldn't experience grief. It's part of the process. A lot of times, how are we living life, and how are we connecting with the people around us? How are we noticing that preciousness, and how are we communicating? It wasn't the first half of my life. I don't think that I even told my parents that I love them. I just assumed they knew. I just assumed, that's not a necessary thing to say. And then at one point, when I started working a lot with the teachings around death and living life fully, I realized, life is impermanent. I don't know when it's going to end for me, for them. So every time that I talk to them, I tell them that I love them. And those things, I have no idea how, whenever it is, if they pass away before me, how it's going to be for me. It might still be, challenging to navigate and to process it. And at the same time, I know that in living, I've been doing what I feel is the right thing so that I don't have unsaid things. I don't have things that, we didn't uh, said to each other or experience. And I think that that makes a difference of seeing life, whenever someone passes away, as understanding, well, what's the teaching? What did they bring into our lives? What's that thing? And as you're saying, like as well from that box is like, well, yeah, the box isn't working, and it helped to survive. I work a lot with trauma, with family constellations, and it's like, well, this helped to survive, but as you're saying, with a lot of symptoms that weren't talked about, were super unhealthy, and it's like, well, do I want to repeat those? I don't.
Yeah, I don't think any of us do. And it's funny, you're speaking about grief, and really that is where we're at collectively. I think. I think we are grieving a lot. I think we are grieving what happened in the pandemic,
Hmm.
and all of the losses that we experienced, whether they were physical losses, people did die, but also there was a lot of lying and a lot of ending of family relationships, friendships, people, a lot of division, and the old world died, right? Something ended. And we can see that manifesting more and more and more and more and more. And what we need to do right now, what we are doing right now, is grieving. Now, in grief, if you've ever watched anybody grieve, some people grieve by letting themselves fully feel the feeling and just like sob when they need to, and then pick themselves up off the floor and keep going because breath is still in the body and there's still more life to be lived, and they find the joy and experience. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are those who don't, who just act like, it didn't happen. They drink a lot. They do other things, other substance abuses. They get abusive towards other people. They project, they're unkind, they're cruel. And we see both ends of that spectrum in humanity right now. We can see that there are people who are just like feeling the intensity of the sadness of where humanity has been for millennia, because our consciousness is starting to rise now. And we can see people who are like, so when are we going back to normal? When are we going to go back to what was? And we're never going to go back. Like, we can't put Pandora back in the box. And so right now, collectively, that need for grieving, that need for like really deep mourning is imperative to be able to acknowledge, oh, this feeling that I'm suppressing with all of these yucky behaviors and habits, that feeling exists because not only did I lose, this friend and that cousin and that, family member or whatever in the pandemic, I also, had this other terrible thing happen to me. And before that, I've had all these other traumatic experiences. And in my lineage, there is trauma that's been stored, as we know, for 7 generations in our genetic material, in our DNA. So, and, this is why I love the life activation. It brings that full of light, because then you can start to acknowledge, okay, the healing in this is possible. Just like you were saying about your students, it's possible that you're already worthy and deserving of love and whole and complete. It's possible. But in order to be able to rewrite that story, you have to acknowledge where the seed of your entire story comes from and like uproot it, instead of just like trying to hack at the branches as it like keeps growing another one, another one, and making a mess.
Yeah, and I often talk and I run a lot of workshops around rewriting your story. And a lot of it is, as you're saying, acknowledging, because anything that we try to repress or push away is going to return more toxic. So
Yes.
it's like acknowledge and know you can transmute. You can transmute anything and you can choose something different. And I think this is one of the things that I would love to have a little bit of a talk on. This is like the need to bring the what we would call spiritual perspective, which this is just life. Like it's not about being spiritual or non-spiritual. This is just life. How can we bring a lot of these perspectives more into the spaces that have been on that box, that are not looking at that, for them to understand these different perspectives, whether it is through astrology, through like energy healing, through like different like practices with the body, the mind, the energy, whatever that is. How is that going to have an impact on someone's everyday life, that a lot of people are on survival mode and they're just trying to keep up? And it's like, well, like if we understand this, we can bring it all together so that we can then do something different. But as long as we are not including all of these other perspectives, that in my eyes, there's just a very small percentage of the population that we are including that perspective. It's like we need to bring this together and to bring those perspectives to start to feel a little bit better, and and for our mental health, especially given that we're moving into a world of AI and a lot of the technology for like bringing our consciousness and just what's the name, transhumanism and all of
Yes.
this like technology in the body. And it's like uh, yeah, I would love to just talk a little bit about that and your view on all of this.
Cool. That's an awesome question. Yeah, that little nugget about transhumanism, that's Pluto moving into Aquarius, right? He's just retrograded into Capricorn, and we're gonna like feel the end of the end before something new comes. And I assure you that those in the United States will feel it the most. They're having their Pluto return. It's really going to be a vibe or a something. It's something to witness for sure. We were talking about it earlier. I was like, I got my popcorn. I'm ready. But that theme of transhumanism is Pluto in Aquarius, right? This karmic understanding of like, what does it mean to be human? And you were, talking about, well, what do we need? Is it astrology? Is it this? Is it that? My like simple answer is breath. Truly. Aside from the fact that I think the world everybody needs to do one hero dose of mushrooms in a safe container that is being lovingly held. I think that everybody needs to do mushrooms. We'll have a very different reality after that, but I digress. We'll leave it alone. I don't know how I'm going to convince everybody of that, but instead, if they're not willing, then you're breathing anyway. And the more consciously you breathe, the more that you can start to shift and transform the reality that you're in. Because we know that through the breath, you can change your whole life, because you can start to tune into what is happening in my body. Where are my thoughts happening? If you do just like a quick body scan in your life, in your day, every day, start with your feet, move up to the legs, knees, thighs, hips, glutes, etc. You know how the body is. You go all the way up, reach your fingers in your toes, and stop in each place and feel your feelings. Pause to notice your thoughts. When you're in the space of your belly, where do your thoughts go? Are you being judgmental? Are you thinking about that terrible thing that you keep thinking about? Are you obsessing over work when you're in your heart? Like all of these different things, right? And the more time that we spend breathing, and this is why, they say everybody should meditate 20 minutes a day. Unless you're really busy, then you should meditate for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth. We need to teach our children, and there are many places in the world where we're starting to, but we need to teach our children how to breathe, how to pause, how to allow their emotions when the emotions come up, to not be the kind of parents that react to emotions in such a way that we disregard our children from feeling those feelings. And then when we're in that kind of consciousness and that kind of reality, then it doesn't matter what's coming up or what tools you're using, because like I was saying earlier about one portal opening to the next, to the next, to the next. When you start to consciously breathe, you will see, if you literally just start taking 10, they say 11 minutes a day will change your life. Take 11 minutes a day and breathe, and then notice all of a sudden you're like finding crystals everywhere that you look, or you're like suddenly a book comes across your desk and you're like, I think I need to read this. And then your whole life is changed, right? And the right tools for you, because the tools for me are not necessarily the tools for other people. They tend to overlap, and really every tool is the same. And it all comes back to you are alive, you are human, and the thing that's making you human in this lifetime is the breath. So if we're uncertain about what's to come with AI and all of these deep fakes and the mind messages and mind melding that we're having, which also, by the way, in future realities, maybe not in 20 years, but certainly in 250 years, when the age of Aquarius really begins, there will be telepathy. It won't just be, you were thinking about your mom, so you picked up the phone and called her and she was like, I was just thinking about it. Won't be that. It will literally be, I'm thinking of you and you're hearing me thinking of you. And so we don't need to pick up the phone because we're already in that. And that is happening already with spirit for many people. And that's scary. And so if it overwhelms you, breathe. You're alive. It's okay. That would be like my main tip.
Yeah. I often think a lot of times that when I'm teaching, I usually say, life is simple. We just overcomplicate it because of, as we were talking, we've been conditioned and we have so much trauma or things that came before. Most things are simple, as you're saying, just breathing consciously, paying attention to the feelings. Now, the thing with that is, and I know this firsthand, I was disconnected from my body. Most people are disconnected from their body. They don't know how to feel feelings, which is a protective mechanism for survival. Because if they start feeling, it's too much because they don't know how to feel and there's no safe container. Um, you know, if we don't know how to be with that, if we haven't seen someone or been modeled or shown, okay, like this is possible, this is, like the way of approaching this. And as you're saying, like whatever it is, whatever technique, methodology, tradition, we are all going to connect with something different. And then, as you're saying, the portals or the gates are going to open for each one however they need to be. But when we actually go to the root of things, everything is simple. How can we allow ourselves to do that? And how can we find those that can show us and that can be with us so that we feel safe enough? What you were saying with mushrooms as an example, it's like I know a lot of people that do mushrooms, but they don't do it in a safe way. They are not doing it in a way for actually as a process for healing and understanding themselves and opening to a different perspective. There's different ways of exploring life, and as well, like one of the things that this is my view, nothing is wrong. Like no one is bad. This is all part of like just trying to explore, life. And yet with that, it's like, okay, what do I want? What do I resonate with? Where do I feel like going? And understanding that, a lot of us, what you were saying, like at the beginning, I usually say about the purple, like rainbow unicorn. It's like because it's of the family, it's a lot of times the people with the black sheep syndrome, they feel like there's something wrong with them instead of being like, I'm the one here to change everything.
That's right.
And like when a lot of us decide to go on a journey, one of the things with that is that we're going to leave things behind.
Yes.
Countries, family, friends, careers.
Yes.
And it's scary. So we need to honor the fact that it is scary. And then, deciding, do I want to keep on following my intuition? Do I want to keep on following what feels resonating and in alignment? Or do I want to continue fitting in and, slightly abandoning some of my parts to be able to operate and to be able to still, do things? And that's just, it's not that one is right and the other one is wrong. It's just like what feels more alive, or more what feels more light, and what's the approach that we need to give it. Because perhaps, okay, it needs just to take, what you were saying, just little by little, small steps. And some people are ready to be like, I'm just going to change everything. And it's like, I'm fully, like awakening. And it's like, I'm done with this life and then changing completely.
That's one way. It'll follow you, though. Go slowly, go with your breath. It's a better path. It's a
Yeah.
better path.
But like everybody has their own, I think, their own journey that we need to go through. But it comes, for me, a lot of times comes back to, it's simple. Let's go with what's simple. Let's not overcomplicate it. And as you're saying, just the breath, or just walking and putting your feet on the ground, like just paying attention to that. We can go into, sometimes I find in the, let's call it, in the spiritual spaces that I'm in, sometimes some people, it's all like, like, let's connect to this. And I'm like, yes, let's connect to all of these guides, all of these angels, all of these different beings.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be here. Let's be grounded as well. Let's actually, have
Yes.
this balance.
Yeah. It's funny. I find a lot in those spiritual spaces. I've had a very hard time being anywhere near some of those spaces in the past 5 years or so. I sort of would dip my toes in, but I was always too real to fake it in that way. And now I find it's such escapism. There's so much pretentiousness in it. There's so much privilege in it. And it automatically negates having to do actual work. My partner and I lived in Costa Rica for 12 months in 2021. Sorry, 12 weeks rather. We were 14 months gone, but 12 weeks in Costa Rica. And he looked at me at one point and said, does anybody have a job, or they all just like go to drum circles? And I was like, oh, it's mostly just the drum circles here. It's just mostly the like ayahuasca to cacao ceremony to fire ceremony to dance party to fire circle to ayahuasca. It's just this terrible cycle. And I don't think that that's better. I actually think it's worse. I think they're weaponizing so much of what needs to be brought into the rest of the world by keeping it insular in this way and being like, we're doing the work. I'm like, you're just on drugs. You just have a drug addiction, but you're calling it medicine, and that's still just drugs. Like, if you're abusing ayahuasca, you're on DMT, babe. Like, it's not a joke. And also, that's not how the shamans did it in olden days, and we can leave that alone. But yeah, there's just, it's great to do it, but it's also really, really important to integrate all of these things, because in order for people who are in lives that want to make those choices, but they don't know how to make those choices, it's not like, those people are sitting in their living rooms freaking out, feeling like the black sheep, feeling abandoned, feeling alone, and thinking to themselves, you know what I'm going to do? Take a solo retreat to Costa Rica for 6 months. Like, no, they're still where they are. So if you're somebody who has experienced enlightenment of any kind to any level, which, by the way, none of us are, but any kind of awakening, bring it back to the people that you love, that you have sort of like, quote, transcended, and see if you can offer to them something that you've received. Because, when I started on my journey of consciousness and evolution and spirituality, when I first came out of the psychic closet, people were like, she's whack, she's weird, crazy girls being crazy, her father was crazy and so was she, like this kind of vibe. And now 15 years later, they come to me to be like, hey, what does it mean that this is happening? Hey, I just got a tarot deck, and what does this card mean? Or like, oh, this is happening, and like, I think it's astrological. What is it about? And I'm like, it is real. These tools are real. We do need to like bring down these teachings. And, you said like these ancient things. I saw this meme not long ago that said, modern problems need ancient solutions. And it's the truth. Like, we need to go back to the earth, to the plants to the, to understanding that everything is medicine, that when you whisper to the trees, they whisper back. We need that to
Mm.
be able to be a better species, I think.
Yeah, and with that, I think that, and this is something that I tell a lot of times, we need to understand there's a difference between ancient wisdom and ancient ways. We don't need to
Mhm.
go back to ancient ways. We need to go
Yeah.
back to ancient wisdom because there were a lot of things in the past that were not working, even though they had the wisdom, because the same context and survival mechanisms and whatever it is. And now it's like, okay, let's use the wisdom, but let's now go back in time. Let's use the wisdom in our modern life. And I want to touch on something that you mentioned about those people, that sometimes this is one of the challenging things that I have found in the conscious spiritual community as well. There's a lot of people that are grounded, that are actually in the path and they are experiencing it, and then there's a lot of people that you're saying that this is a way of escaping. This is a way of, like not actually doing the inner work that is necessary for them. And they are just doing all of these external ceremonies or all of these different things
Mhm.
that you know, seems to be great, but because sometimes they are not doing it from that perspective, then it's challenging. And I think one of the problems there is like, without judging people, we're all in our own path, and whoever is doing that, that's their path. And whenever it is that something might click or change, wonderful, and if not, wonderful as well. The problem there a lot of times is the people looking at that, and
Mm.
and it's like, how then do we approach life if what we are seeing is like potential? It's like, oh, these are all privileged people. So only spiritualism is for privileged people that have a lot of money and can go, like they don't have to think about work. Whereas
Mhm.
on the flip side, it's like if we are too fixated on we need to work and there's no space for ceremonies or rituals or connection, then we are on the other spectrum, and it's like, let's bring this all together. And we need to hear more from people. And this is a lot of times why I'm doing this podcast and these conversations and the work that I do, because I do feel that it is so necessary to be able to actually put everything on the table and to say like, yes, there's, like seemingly spiritual people. We're all spiritual. We're all spirit. So we,
Yes.
but there's these people that seem to be that, and it's like, well, how are they actually living? Like, what's their life outside of when they are in those ceremonies? How,
Mhm.
and just look at that. It's the same as I keep on telling a lot of times to my clients and to my students, like, what is success? Like when you're looking at someone and say, ah, that's a successful person. Are you meaning just money? Are you meaning their fame? Are you meaning their personal relationships that most likely you have no idea about? It's like
Mhm.
we we are not used to seeing the whole picture a lot of times, and and because we don't see that, and we have a tendency in our society to compare and try to go to those places, and whatever we've been told that is the right thing or the good. And it's like, how can we see more of the whole picture? And how can we understand, like, there's people that seemingly are not spiritual at all. They're some of the most connected people that I know,
Yes.
that they go to the office every single day, but they are pure light. They are joy. They are enjoying their life. They are
Mhm.
not, as you're saying, potentially in Costa Rica or Bali or whenever it is, like on
Mhm.
retreat or doing ceremonies,
Yeah.
and they are spiritual, like they are living spiritually because they are connected and they are in alignment and they are doing what they want to do. And then there's other people that are doing those things, that they are in Bali, they are in Costa Rica, that are as well super connected, and that is authentic. And then
Mhm.
there's everything as well that's not all of that. And how
Yeah.
can we, discern? How can we understand? And how can we not get enamored with that? It's like, who doesn't want to be, at the beach or at the forest or the jungle every single day in ceremony, instead of, like going to an office or thinking about money or things like that. But
Yeah.
we need to go with what we are as well.
Yeah, I think my take on that would be stay in your own lane. My like big work right now is on focusing on myself and controlling me and improving me and liking where I am and not being like, what's this person doing or that person? How's this person affecting these people? You know, there's a lot of people in my business who are, you know, big name people, and I'm not going to drop their names, but they have these reputations of being some kind of a leader. And in real life, they kind of suck as people. And I don't want to follow someone who sucks as a person. I don't want to follow somebody else's spiritual, you know, quote unquote path into the jungle. I want to go to the jungle. Don't get me wrong. Get me back to the jungle tomorrow. But I don't want to be somebody who gets lost in it. I want to be somebody who brings people to it or who brings it back to the people who are still living very much in a matrix, who are trying to figure out, okay, I am a spirit, I am alive, and we're all figuring it out now. Thank you, pandemic. We all found out that we're alive and any one of us could die, and we're a sensitive species, sensitive to all kinds of things, physically sensitive and also energetically sensitive. And as we start to wake up globally more and more and more every day, people are learning different things. They're, you know, the things that were tongue in cheek for them now resonate, they're now hitting. And we need to be able to just focus on where is our own shadow? Where is our own work to do? It doesn't matter what other people are doing on stages and the lies they're telling. Their truth will come out just like every truth has come out that, you know, since 2020 and before and beyond. And, you know, we just have to trust that the truth with capital T's, the universal truth is undeniable. And so as we live into that truth, we have to just not take it personally what other people are doing, not be concerned about this one's path, how they're learning, what they're doing, how they're experiencing it, not trying to like condemn people for their beliefs, but rather to just let people believe what they believe and focus on your beliefs. Why do you behave the way that you behave? You know, whether it's because of trauma or lived experience or a combination of both, or things that you read that you now have superimposed into your personality, thinking this is what's going to solve me. There's like this weird thing that we're trying to figure out, which is how do I want to be human? How do we want humanity to look? So if there's something in humanity that you're like, we need to be better at this, go be better at it.
Yeah. And you know, I think that I keep on telling people, find inspiration in others. Like we can find inspiration in other stories, in other like work, in other perspectives, but don't, you know, like in a sense, don't idolize them because they are not you. You don't know half of their life, as you're saying, or like people that seem to have it together, they don't, because we are all figuring it out, and and we all bring our own, you know, like luggage with us, and when we are able to focus on ourselves. This is, I think, that one of the challenging things is like all that we need to do is work on us. If we would all do that, this world would be so much different. If we would all, as you mentioned before, just breath, like, and movement and do that consciously and feeling, that would be enough. We don't need to go and, you know, like, and do so much stuff for other people. Because just by being ourselves and showing that, the people around us will notice. They will consciously or unconsciously start to notice our behavior, our energy, our vibration, and that has a ripple effect. And I think that the more that we have the courage to take responsibility and to look, as you were saying, to our beliefs, to our trauma, to our blockages, and to understand, okay, let's do this. And it's a continuous work. You know, like I've been doing this for over 20 years. and I still have layers that I keep on removing or to embracing and changing. And it's like, until we die, most likely it's not going to end. So,
That's right.
how can we continue doing that? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say also, find the people that can help guide you on the path. I've been very, very lucky to have really beautiful people that have been teachers and guides for me. And, in not idolizing them, I know that I've evolved, as any good student does, past them and into new teachers, new guides, and they keep showing up for you. But make sure that you're anchoring to somebody that you think can help you to move you from one place to another, whether that is through ceremony or through healings or through readings or through whatever it might be. Find the people that will help you, that you believe will help you. Experiment, explore, get as many readings as possible, learn from as many teachers as you can, study as many books, take as many courses. Don't overload yourself, integrate, but really, really, really find the right guides, because we all need to be following one another into safer spaces with more consciousness, with more love, with more integrity as we do this work. So don't think that you have to go and do this whole thing on your own. It's not a solo mission. We were all created in the image of God, and this godliness needs to come out in all of us, but we're also one. We're from the same source. So it's got to happen together. So yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And as you're saying that, and as we're coming towards the end of this conversation, if people are resonating with you, with your energy, and would love to know more how they could potentially work with you, where can they find you?
You can go to janastern.com. That's JANASTERN.com. You can book services through there. There's all heavy descriptions of all the things that I offer on there. So go ahead, check out the services. And if you want to follow me on all the socials, it is Jana Stern Healer, so JANASTERN Healer, on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, on you name it. You can follow me there. TikTok, although I'm not there so much, but all the places. It's September 5th at 5:55, by the way.
Nice. Synchronicities, messages. Pay attention to those messages, everywhere. So and I'll put those links on the show notes so that, if you're listening, you're resonating with Jana, just, go there and check it out. As I often say, we are all going to resonate with someone different. And this is why, even though sometimes some of my business mentors tell me, don't promote other people, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to promote other people. They are not my competition. Whoever is the people that are needing and wanting to work with me because they resonate with me, they will come for me. And the other ones, I want to let them know there's other awesome people sharing their own ways and their own, services that they can resonate with. So
I love that so much. I'm the same way. So you're right in my heart there.
Beautiful. So if you've been listening to this conversation up until now, let us know what did you hear, what what was interesting, anything that you want to keep the conversation going on all of these topics that we went through a range of topics here during this conversation. So yes, just let us know in the conversations, in the comments, whatever it is that you're finding this, and thank you for listening. Thank you, Jana, for your time, for your energy, for everything that you shared. Loving this conversation, and hopefully we have a few more conversations like this.
I hope so too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.